Welcome back. This is Kat Carr. I have a page on Facebook called Communicating with Non-Human Creatures, A View of the Unspoken World. I've kind of given an introduction previously as to what this page is about and what my mission statement is. So, if you're still with me, then that's cool. I'm guessing that either you're just really curious as to what's going on here, how am I actually communicating with animals, or you're a person who is perhaps involved in the same type of mission that I am, or, has a personal interest in making the world a better place for animals and insects and being able to live more harmoniously together. Because what I was saying previously was that many types of animals, and especially insects, are viewed by a lot of people as a nuisance and something that they need to, exterminate, terminate, eradicate, that kind of thing, and it doesn't have to be that way. So for whatever reason that you're still listening, I appreciate it, and just know that this is the first time that I'm really talking about these things. It's been all kind of my experiences happening throughout the years, and all the information is swirling around in my head, and I'm just trying to think of what's the best way to present. So I appreciate your patience. I would say that, even from an early age, I was always so intrigued by all non-human creatures. I loved all types of animals and all types of insects, but I wasn't communicating directly with them. I got along with them. It seemed like most animals just were kind of naturally drawn to me, or, they weren't afraid of me. So, looking back on it, perhaps they maybe were trying to communicate them, but I just didn't know how to, because, I grew up in a household where if I was to go to one of my parents and say, oh, I'm talking with the cat, or, they would just laugh it off. If I was to say I was talking with insects, they would have said, don't ever say that again, that's nonsense. But, so kind of skipping ahead, to 2012 is really where I see things as being the breaking point or the change for me, where I tapped into this ability. And like I said before, I don't really know what, caused that, or, why it happened for me. But after all these years, because, that was in 2012 and now it's 2019. So 7 years I've been experiencing this now. And as I've researched all kinds of topics, I did a lot of research trying to see if I could ever come across the information that correlate with what I was experiencing, and wasn't finding anything. So I was like, I really need to document this and put it out there, because who else is going to do it? Maybe somebody else has something out there that I just haven't come across yet. And if so, if anybody knows of anything, feel free to, send me that information. I would love to read that, or watch a video or listen to a podcast or anything where anybody has similar experiences. And I'd love to connect with another person who has this ability, because over the past few years, I've, really got into researching about esoteric things, psychic phenomenon, all these kind of things. Maybe because of my ability, it piqued my interest more in things that were, out of the natural realm, which a lot of psychic abilities are, considered to be kind of out of the natural realm. I've come across people online mostly who are able to actually, I do know a couple of people in real life actually as well, who can speak with spirits, communicate with spirits, and that kind of thing. And where this correlates is because, everything, from what my understanding is, everything in this universe is built upon vibrational frequency. It's, every life form, every object even, is in motion. just vibrating at different vibrational frequencies, whether higher or lower. And it seemed like, from my research, that those who are able to communicate with spirits and other, unseen type entities, it had to do with frequency. And they, many of them understood that principle. And they were kind of tapping into a certain frequency and putting their mind in a certain, like a meditative state almost, kind of bypassing the normal consciousness. So that's the closest thing, really, that I can, describe as to how I'm able to communicate with non-human creatures on a vibrational and frequency level. I'm not able to, at this time, communicate with spirits or anything like that. I do have more of, like a clairsentience, they call it, where I can feel things, and I think everyone has some psychic abilities or intuition, so I don't think I'm unusual in that. But I'm not a person that, you would come to and I'd say, okay, I can tap into, a loved one or something, like, who do you want to talk to? And I can reach out and talk to spirits who are no longer with us, or, of other realms or anything like that. Every communication that I've had is with non-human creatures who are still living and of this earth, of this realm. So, but, the vibrational frequency is where I was correlating the psychic abilities to. Because, like I said, the turning point that I had really was in 2012. And it was one evening, probably about, 9 o'clock at night. It was dark outside, and I had walked outside and was sitting and just enjoying a few moments before I was going to go and lay down and go to bed because I had to work the next day. But I was going through some things in my life at that time, and looking back on it, it was like I was really trying to, I was trying to live my life in a way that, on the outside, I look like everything's fine, everything's good, and inside I was just really hurting and just feeling like I couldn't continue on in the way that I was. Not that I was, going to hurt myself or anything, but it was like, something's got to give, my life has got to change, because, inside I was very unhappy. So I'm just sitting outside this one evening after dark. There might have been some moonlight, but not a whole lot of light outside. There was no, really like porch lights on or anything like that. And right when I was about to go inside, I was sitting down, but I was, about to get up, and I noticed something out of the corner of my eye that caught my eye. But it was in my peripheral vision, and it was something white in the darkness. And, it was relatively small and kind of fluttering through the air, and I'm like, what is that? Is it a feather? Or, it was so bright in contrast to the darkness, and it was maybe about 25 or 30 feet away. So I get up from where I'm sitting and walk over, and I'm trying to keep my eyes on, that spot where it's going through the air into the ground, because I didn't want to lose sight of it. And I didn't. And as I approach, and it flutters to the ground in the grass in the yard. And as I get closer, I realize it's some type of a butterfly or a moth. But I remember thinking, was it some type of a small bird? Because it was kind of a large size to be a moth. And I didn't want to startle it, so I didn't get, really close up on it at first. I was, a few feet away. But I decided to turn the light on my phone, my flashlight app or whatever. And so I turned that on and kind of slowly raised just to, confirm what is this? Because as I was getting closer, I was like, this is kind of large to be a butterfly or whatever. But it was a white moth. It was a purely white moth. It had no coloration on its wings or body. And it was an unusually large size. Like, I don't know on measurements, but I'd say if it was to be sitting in the palm of my hand, from the front to the back of it would have went all the way from, the end of my middle finger back to where my hand meets my wrist, the palm meets the wrist. I mean, a very large moth. But I crouched down and kind of slowly leaned into the moth, and I noticed it had these beautiful, big, solid black eyes. And they were shining, and the eyes were just like a magnet, because almost as soon as I locked in to the gaze of this moth, there was a magnetic feeling that my eyes locked in with the moth's eyes, and, you could feel like this magnetic energy, this magnetic pull. And for a few seconds, not very long, but for a few seconds, there was this pull that just locked me in, where I was almost paralyzed. Like, I don't think I could have moved if I'd wanted to. And it was in that instant that information was transferred to me. That was my first communication with a non-human creature. I would say that the way that the message came through, it wasn't like a voice or anything, but it was almost like I saw a few words in my head, inside my mind's eye, like a neon sign, and it said, "Change is coming." But anyone who's, had those kind of communications, whether it be with, spirits or whatever, I think they would understand that a lot of things come to you in symbolism, and then it's kind of your feelings and your interpretation that is putting it into words. But the main message was change is coming. It wasn't just those words that meant so much, but it was the feeling that went with it, because this feeling of magnetism and this locked-in feeling for a moment had such power. But it wasn't like a, overwhelming type of thing. It wasn't like I was being overpowered or, controlled or something. It was just like something had to, get my attention and, deliver this information. And then that was it. And there was a feeling of relief that came with that. It was like something that you just, in your heart. So change is coming. From that point on, then I believed that, I just felt like there was this was definitely a communication from the universe, or, something coming through. Now, later on, I questioned, okay, was this just kind of I don't know what you would call it, but, something was communicating with me and just used the moth? Or would I be able to communicate further with non-human creatures? That was later on down the line. So, and change did end up coming. I guess that's a whole nother story. But yeah, change came on within a year, and my whole life had changed around. And yes, things have gotten much better. But it wasn't until, probably a year or so after that I started kind of exploring more with things, because like I said, I had the question in my mind, was this an isolated incident that, a spirit or the universe wanted to use this beautiful creature to communicate just a one-time thing with me? Or, is there something more to insects that I had never thought about before? So I'll get into that more in the next show, because I'm about out of time. But I want to thank you for joining me, and I'm going to put a link up soon for any questions that you may have, a way that you can contact me if you don't already have that information. But hopefully you'll join me again. We can go into a little bit more information on the next show, and I'll see you then.